Bill O'Brien is building something at Boston College as the Eagles are now a ranked team.
You are Locked On Boston College, your daily podcast on the Boston College Eagles. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hello, everyone, and welcome. This is Locked On Boston College, your team every day. I'm your host, AJ Black. Today's episode is brought to you by 5-Hour Energy. Go to 5hourenergy.com and use promo code LOCKEDONCFB to receive 20% off your order. This is our recap episode. You got your live postcast from me yesterday in a luxury box at BC. That's where I recorded. You can check that out at the Locked On Boston Postcast YouTube page. And it's on the YouTube, on your your podcast feeds as well. So check that out. But today we're going to talk about the game. But before we get into the game, we had breaking news right before we recorded, a couple hours before we recorded. Boston College is now ranked. The AP poll came out, and the Eagles are number 24 in the country. So to kick off this conversation, I brought in Eagle Insider, my co-writer, Mitch Wolf. Mitch, how's it going?
Oh, how sweet it is to be talking about a ranked team for the first time in 6 seasons. And also to both of us now, both 3-0 with our college and professional teams across the board. So look at us.
Yeah, I know. The Patriots won, which surprised me against a Bengals team that looked completely hapless. But we're going to talk about BC here for a second. When I heard that what you just said, I saw that in the press release. I cannot believe. I swore Jeff Hafley was ranked at one point, but now that I think about it, it must be one of those like false.
The Mandela effect.
It's a Mandela effect because he never did. It was 2018. It was, I think, right before the Clemson college game day game, wasn't it?
2018 was I was there for that game. Last of Easter's ranked was there for the Michael Walker punt return touchdown, which was probably the loudest I've heard Alumni Stadium, if not right behind the Tyler Murphy touchdown against USC in 2014. This is really exciting. Again, BC looking at the quality of their opponents, maybe not as good as some other teams, but I think the fact that BC dominated both of their opponents, especially Florida State on the road. And obviously we know a little more about Florida State now. They're not going to be a top 10 team. They're not going to be a playoff team. They'll be lucky to be a bowl team at this point, honestly. But BC went into that building and just completely pantsed them. They controlled that game with a lead of at least 2 scores for most of that game. And Florida State was never really threatening to make that game close. I mean, they scored that touchdown in the second half, but BC went right down the field and scored to make it a 15-point game, and it was basically over then. And against Duquesne, you talked about it on the postcast. BC has had these struggles with FCS teams before where they let them hang around. There's some questions, just like, oh, this was a pretty close game where it had no right to be. BC made sure that was never a problem against Duquesne, which, again, not a great FCS team, but BC throttled them 42-0 at halftime, and they put in all their backups in the second half because the game was over. So I think you'd be hard. I think there are a lot of teams kind of outside of maybe the top 12 to 15 teams where you could rank, 20 of those teams, 25 of those teams in those 15 spots. But if you look at all those teams, a lot of them beat the crap out of an FCS opponent too. A team like Indiana beat Western Illinois 77-0. Great win for them. But you look at the previous games, they either also beat and not necessarily dominated a G5 team at home, or essentially they're beating worse teams and they're at home. BC went on the road to Florida State, which I know renovations and all that, but that's a hostile environment. They went and dominated that game on the road. They come back on a short week and completely embarrass an FCS program. So you'd be hard pressed to find another team like that. Even look at a team like Illinois who, beat Kansas at home. And that's a good win. Kansas is a pretty solid team. Week before that, they beat the crap out of Eastern Illinois. But both those games are at home for them. And, Kansas was ranked 19th, so they're kind of in that fringe ranking. So how good do we really think they are? A team like Syracuse, they've had both their games at home against first one, a team like Ohio, where I think if we look back at it, that game was, they eventually pulled away, but that game was, a little hairy for points in the first half. And then this week they're like, oh yeah, they beat a ranked Georgia Tech team, and they barely beat a ranked Georgia Tech team, but it was by a field goal. And frankly, I think Georgia Tech choked that one away. I think they had a much better chance to win that. Coming back, they get an onside kick, but And both those games are at home because Syracuse like never leaves the dome until mid-October. So, I think it's very fair that BC is ranked. And frankly, I think they could have been ranked higher because in the 2 games that they have on their schedule, they went out and completely dominated their opponents.
So that's our little quick conversation on the rankings because it's the middle of the season. It's still a great moment though, and it does show how far Bill O'Brien has already taken the program in just 2 weeks to take care of business. And I was thinking back, you had mentioned, well, this kind of just going to bleed into the Duquesne talk about how BC struggled against Holy Cross last year. It took them, a fluke. What was it? A fumble at the very end that basically saved their butts. But it wasn't just that game. Yes, they obliterated Colgate. I remember going to that game and covering it. But the main game, I go back to the main game. They struggled at points during that game too.
I'll say that was a completely different type of team just because we talked about how BC's offensive line was so much better in the trenches than Duquesne. Looking at BC's offensive line back then, that was a middling G5 offensive line, I would say. So, we're operating with a bit of a different circumstance. But I do see your point that game, BC was not able to dominate that because they didn't have enough down the offensive line thanks to the injuries. So yeah, I think there's some different circumstances there, but I do see your point.
All right, so let's talk about this Duquesne game. 56-0, Boston College goes out and smokes them. Duquesne, they had one chance to score in this game, and I think it was either third or fourth quarter. They tried to kick a field goal and they missed a 31-yard field goal, and that was about it. What were your takeaways just overall from this game, Mitch?
I think, you talked a lot about the coaching, and I think that's extremely important. And you talked about this moment, and I just kind of want to harp on how important I think it is. It's that moment where I think BC is up 21-0. They're on defense. Duquesne has the ball. They're moving a little bit. They've had some successful run plays. I'm going to try to pull up the play-by-play here to get the exact moment because I know they were actually starting to move the ball on the ground, which is pretty surprising. And in the early part of the game, they had some quick passes, and I tweeted this out that I thought that basically BC was playing back, said, okay, Duquesne, if you want to keep throwing these quick outs to the sideline, get it 5 yards every time, that's fine. We'll let you have that. We're not going to let you beat us deep with an explosive play. Let's see. Are they going to say anything about a timeout? I don't think so. I don't see one. I think here it is. So I think it's looking at maybe like 11 minutes left or 12 minutes left in the second quarter. I think, here we go. Yes, because Duquesne runs for 6 yards. Next one, they run for 4, get a first down. I think BC calls their timeout there. And like you said, Bill O'Brien just starts ripping into his defense, just because Duquesne gained 1 first down on the ground. And I think this was after the pick 6 too. So they already had just made a big play. And then I think he wanted to make sure they weren't let down. And I'll be honest, watching him just rip his defense a new one, you might have to put the explicit tag on this episode because I'll be damned if that didn't want to make me put on a helmet and pads and run through a blocking sled.
Yeah, he's like that all the time. And I think it's important. I might have said this last night that he's from that Saban Belichick tree too. After the games, it's hard to talk positively about things because he just wants to talk. He has that mentality, we still need to improve here. We still need to improve here. And it's very different than Hafley because Hafley wanted to always make his guys feel good. That was kind of his thing. Bill O'Brien is.
The interesting thing about that is that, and you might not have heard this on the broadcast, but the announcers talked about how when they got back from beating Florida State, they talked about how a lot of coaches will usually show film or games of games where FCS teams upset the FBS team, say, hey, if you guys don't lock in, this could happen to you. And Bill O'Brien flipped that on its head and apparently showed them footage of teams just beating the brakes off of FCS opponents. This is what you got to do. This is the expectation here. So that's what we're going to do. And I thought that was an interesting inversion. And obviously it ended up working out. If things didn't go the way, that'd be an interesting talking point. But I think that's interesting juxtaposition with him, again, being that stickler for perfection. And if things aren't going right, we got to fix it. And I'm going to tell you about it. But he's going into the week, says, you guys are capable of blowing out this team. And here's some footage of other teams doing it, and you can do this. So it's a very interesting juxtaposition of a coaching style.
It's interesting because you brought that up because someone asked him that in the press conference, and he claims he never did that.
Okay,
I don't know.
Well, it wouldn't be the first time that game announcers made up a story just for something to sound good.
Yeah, because he seemed confused when we asked him about it.
So somebody just lied to them. So that's cool.
So, anyways, in a moment, I want to get Mitch's takes on the offense, who scored 56 points. They didn't score 56 themselves because there was a defensive score in there. But we'll talk about that. Maybe get a little feedback on how Jacoby Robinson looked in his first outing. Not good. And then a whole lot more. We'll get into all of that in just a moment. Five-hour Energy fixes tired fast, whether you have a long list of work to do or a list of DIY projects to tackle at home. Take a 5-hour energy shot. You can check everything off your list. If you're like me, you always have a large list of projects for the home. When you get your supplies for the project, do not forget the most essential supply, which is a 5-hour energy shot. With zero sugar and a convenient portable size, it's the perfect pick-me-up for getting stuff done. The 5-Hour Energy website has flavors galore like watermelon, tropical burst, grape berry, and more. There's a flavor for anyone. Try them all. On the site, you even have the option to build your own 12 or 24 pack. You choose the flavors, and it is delivered right to your door. If you go to 5hourenergy.com, that's the number 5hourenergy.com, and get some 5-Hour Energy product today, you can use my promo code LOCKEDONCFB to receive 20% off your order. This offer is only valid until September 30th on one order and cannot be used on other promotions. This code is not good on subscription orders. Go to 5hourenergy.com today. This is Locked On Boston College. I'm your host, AJ Black. Thank you all who have checked out some of my postcasts and have checked out last week's episode. Make sure you hit that like and subscribe button, and then go check out Locked On ACC as well. Make sure you go and give them a hard time because I'm sure they're probably still ratting on BC. But check out their work over there as well. Now, Mitch, the offense starts the game off with a 3-and-out. And then the fans start rumbling because they're expecting just an absolute
Fire everyone time.
Yep. What are they doing? What's
It's
going
terrible
on?
Play calling.
Yep. That was uninspired.
Yeah. That's my favorite. Uninspired play calling.
Yep. You got to whip out all the big guns against Duquesne,
Yeah,
right?
Duquesne.
So what was your thought? Thomas Castellanos put up video game numbers in this game. What was your thought about how they looked?
Yeah, so I'm currently writing the game rewatch piece and I'm reviewing the film from the game and watching the offense. The big talking point we talked about this game in terms of the offense was, to what degree is Bill O'Brien and Will Lawing going to open up this offense in terms of the passing game? Because we want to see them do it a little bit. We want to know they can do it going into Missouri because they're going to need to score in that game. Missouri's got a really good passing offense, but obviously you don't want to show too much to opposing defense. You don't want to give stuff away. And watching the game, I think BC did a really good job of, again, opening up the passing game, but I would say everything they showed was nothing like groundbreaking in terms of play calling and play design. Like, from somebody who has spent most of the spring rewatching Bill O'Brien's offenses, these were plays that have been in Bill O'Brien's playbook for decades. They've been plays done with the Patriots, done with the Texans, done with Alabama. He's done it everywhere. So, if teams see it's like, okay, like we know he's going to run this. It's just a matter of players making the plays. And to Thomas Castellanos' credit, he made those plays with flying colors in terms of downfield passing, hitting those deep routes to Deron Bradley, Reed Harris. I would say he missed the one to Jaden Skeet kind of on the edge of the red zone, which was like, you missed some throws here. Like, nobody's perfect. And then he had the other deep throw to Lewis Bond, which is, I think, probably my favorite of his passes because he pinned that right where basically only Bond could get it for a touchdown. That was incredible. And then the other one that he missed, which got a flag called, I think if there's no interference there, I think Jaden McGowan can run right under that for another touchdown. So, that's more of the defense's fault than Thomas Castellanos's. And then had some nice throws over the middle. Had that crosser to Lewis Bond for a big gain. Had the one wheel route to Trayshawn Ward for a touchdown. I thought it was funny that basically I think the only receivers that had more than one target were Lewis Bond and then Matt Reagan, who got 2 targets by Jacoby Robinson in the second half. But yeah, I mean, it was the Bond show. He had 2 targets in the first drive that went 3-and-out, 2 screens basically. That went nowhere. But this is what I kind of expected to see. These are the passing concepts. These familiar. We saw the wheel route again, the one which did have a cool motion. I will say that they were basically an empty and a condensed set. They motioned Lewis Bond into the backfield. He kind of looped around Castellanos, then went out to the wheel route. They hit that for a first down, which was great. So, as we talked about, them doing this to Duquesne it doesn't like really like matter. And it was like, oh, because they did this, they're going to be this dangerous downfield passing game. But we wanted to see that they had the ability to do it against even like a pretty bad team. It's like, okay, we know that they can do it. There is the possibility, the necessary condition is there for them to be able to do it later in the season when they will ostensibly play better opponents, but they'll also, have more practice with these kind of plays. They'll be more ready for it for in-game situations.
And then on the ground, they ran for over 300 yards, and you saw everybody and anybody getting, 5, 6 yards of carry. Talk a little bit about, what you saw in the trenches in this game.
Yeah, the run game took a little while to get going, which, I think they were, again, not trying to break out any crazy schemes. No reason to use it against Duquesne. But it took a few drives for them to start really getting the lean on Duquesne, but eventually it did happen and the dam kind of broke. You saw every running back have a pretty solid day, able to get carries into the second and third level of defense. Another great game for Turbo Richard, having some really nice runs. Got to see some Datrell Johnson, Jordan McDonald really iced the game away with some nice runs. He had like the second highest PFF grade on the team, besides Thomas Castellanos, which was impressive. But yeah, I mean, nothing too crazy in terms of schematic things. You saw like a few wrinkles here and there. There is one play that they are just spamming, and I'm wondering how much they're going to continue that when they aren't basically just dominating teams, because they run this one play, which I'll be writing about on the website, that I'm pretty sure they ran it like 7 times against Florida State, and I think they ran it like 12 more times against Duquesne. And they did add like 1 or 2 little wrinkles to it, which I'm interested to see how they build off those. But it's funny how they're just like, okay, we don't really need to dive deep and play. We're just going to keep spamming this run until they stop it. And they did 1 or 2 times, but then like we still really don't care. Like we're just going to keep doing it because there's no reason for us to call anything else in the second half when we're up by 6 or 7 touchdowns.
And now, if you look at go to Eagle Insider, you can see who exactly played, because they played a lot of guys.
Mm-hmm.
But Logan Taylor made his return, and I think he played 15, 16 snaps. Most guys did. Like that was about the max. I couldn't believe. I think Thomas Castellanos played 24 snaps.
Mm-hmm.
It was just low numbers because they just were so effective of moving the ball down the field.
Mm-hmm.
But you saw your offensive line start to play, and you saw the one guy that was out there the most was Jude Bowery, which I thought was interesting. What do you think was behind that?
I think he's just the youngest guy on the line, and they want to be getting him reps so that he can learn. And obviously had a great game against Florida State. I honestly thought because he was so great against Florida State, I honestly think he played a little bit worse against Duquesne. There was one play that I remember. I don't remember exactly what happened in the play, but he definitely missed his block. And after the play was over, he kind of like clapped his hands together in anger, like, when you're like, oh, you idiot. Which I'm like, okay, like he is learning, like he knows his assignment. He just, didn't execute that play. But this is a guy who, again, is the young guy on this line. Everybody else in this line is, a 4th-year player or older. So I think, and I think he really only stayed in like 1 or 2 extra drives, maybe. So, I know he's been injury prone in the past, but I'm not like gonna get too upset for them trying to say, hey, we want to see how you play with some, especially like you mentioned on the podcast, the previous podcast, you want to see how he plays with these younger guys that could be in the lineup in the coming years, because he's going to be a stalwart for this group. So you want to get him chemistry with some of these younger guys.
All right. And in a moment, Mitch and I are going to wrap up this Duquesne game. We're going to look at how the defense played, who pitched a shutout. We'll talk about what that entailed in just a moment. It's summertime, which means it's barbecue season. Stock up on all your grilling favorites and earn cash back on every purchase when you use Ibotta. So you won't have to choose between burgers or hot dogs. You can get them both. The average Ibotta user earns $256 per year. That could cover the cost of an entire shopping trip, the flight you've been eyeing, or the fancy dinner you've been craving. Other apps give you points that don't amount to much. With Ibotta, you can earn cash back that you can withdraw to your bank account, PayPal, or gift card. Simply add offers in the app, upload your receipt, and voila, the money is yours. Right now, Ibotta is offering our listeners $5 for just trying Ibotta by using the code LOCKEDONCOLLEGE when you register. Just go to the App Store or Google Play Store and download the free Ibotta app to start earning cash back, and use code LOCKEDONCOLLEGE. That's IBOTTA in the Google Play or App Store, and use code LOCKEDONCOLLEGE. This is Locked On Boston College. I'm your host, AJ Black. Thank you all for listening. Make sure you hit the like and subscribe button. We are a daily Boston College podcast. We're the only one out there. There's some other guys that have some other podcasts, but you can get this 5 days a week. We do it 20 to 30 minutes. It's a nice for, either your trip in your car to work, commute, doing your dishes, whatever you want, working out. Come listen. We're talking BC sports here at Locked On BC. All right, so Mitch, the defense here, they pitched a shutout and they had some big plays. What stood out to you? Because I saw some people also gnashing their teeth about them for some reason.
That's what I was gonna say. Is that I was gonna say the people that were saying, "Oh, defense was a bit sloppy." It's like I got news for you. If you think a shutout with less than 150 yards allowed in a game is sloppy, it's gonna be a long season. Because frankly, I thought BC's defense did everything that was asked of them and more. In the first half, when BC has that 3-and-out drive, BC shanks the punt. Duquesne gets good field position. BC shuts him down. Get a pick six later in the first half, which is a great effort by Kari Johnson. You're not getting a lot of the one thing that was kind of surprising, it was the lack of pressure. They were not pressure, lack of sacks. Which obviously now we're going to get back to this whole argument. Oh my God, BC can't sack the quarterback. It's like, well, first of all, I will give Darius Perantes credit because I thought he did a very good job of navigating the pocket and stepping up around pressure. So, his offense tackles would get beat and he would step up away from pressure and get rid of the ball. It was usually inaccurate and didn't gain a lot of yards off it, but he kept the play alive and didn't get sacked. And let me see if I can find the stat because, again, like not a ton of pressures, not a ton of sacks. And again, in the second half, the game was basically over. So even Duquesne kind of abandoned really trying to win the game. So I'm just going to take a second to find this. I will say this in the meantime. I also saw like, oh man, the penalty issue is back. And I just want to say 5 penalties in a game is totally acceptable. Like we don't need to be gnashing our teeth about 5 penalties a game, especially when, sure, one was a declined illegal formation on the punt on the first punt. Okay, fix that in special teams. Have a running into the kicker. Maybe you don't need to call the punt block there, and that's why it happened. But that's maybe a little bit of fluky play. And then you get 2 holdings in the second half when you got backup linemen in there. I looked this up, and now the stat isn't working for me. But I think BC is tied for the 4th fewest penalties in college football, and the team that's in first, Miami of Ohio, has only played in 1 game. They have 2, I think. So I think the average penalties is like 7 or something higher than that. So BC is doing just fine in the penalty department. I don't think there's any reason to panic about that. So that kind of was just like, I think we're just trying to find negative things for no reason when we really don't need to. Okay, so they changed the stat a little bit, but in this game, Duquesne's average time to throw was 2.18 seconds, which is very fast. Your typical average is about 2.5, and BC's average was 2.53 seconds. According to PFF, their average time to pressure allowed was 1.63 seconds. So BC was getting in the backfield almost immediately off the snap. And Perantes, to his credit, did a good job of stepping away from that pressure and just getting rid of the ball as soon as he could, which probably is why he was somewhat inaccurate with it. But you didn't see a ton of sacks in this game, so I'm sure people are going like, "Oh my God, the sacks were a fluke against Florida State." No, just this is a kind of similar story to what happened last year, where there were some fluky things with mobile quarterbacks just being able to evade pressure, to survive a little longer pressure, or just getting rid of the ball super quick, so they can't have sacks. But other than that, very impressed by the second unit defense in the second half to keep the shutout. Obviously, Duquesne does put together 1 drive and ends in a missed field goal. But Jalen Cheek with incredible interception flying in over towards the sideline to make a 1, toe tap interception was a really good play. You mentioned Cam Horsley, just lights out in this game, getting in the backfield all the time. Again, quieter game from Ezraku and Akpala, but you didn't see any huge busted plays. Not really many missed tackles. So just overall, very impressive performance by the defense. I haven't studied the defensive tape as closely yet, but I don't think you saw as aggressive and exotic of a game plan from Tim Lewis, which makes sense. You don't need to pull out all the bells and whistles against a team like Duquesne.
Yeah. Do you expect to see a high number of blitzes on that? Because I don't feel like they even did that.
Do you mean in the Duquesne game or from Missouri?
Duquesne game?
Oh, yeah. BC only blitzed on 23.5% of dropbacks, which is that's a little higher, like 1 rep more than they blitzed against Florida State. and their pressure rate was 23.5%. So, nothing. It's not great, but again, there were some exigent or other circumstances that kind of dictated things not being conducive for high pressure and high sack numbers.
Got it. All right. Any last thoughts before we head out, Mitch?
No, not really. We'll talk about it later, but I'm going to be at the Mizzou game this weekend, so we'll see if maybe I'll do the postcast this time, or we can do it together since I'll be in the press box there. But
Yep.
Excited to get a look at this Mizzou team. I think this is going to be a real challenge for BC. This is by far and away the most dynamic passing attack they have faced this season, and it's probably the most dangerous they'll face all season. So I think they've shown that they have the ability to give teams trouble. We'll see if they'll be able to last for four quarters against a very good SEC team.
All right. Thank you, Mitch. This is AJ Black. You can follow me on Twitter at AJBlack247. You can follow Mitch at Mitchell T. Wolf. We're both writers over at Eagle Insider. I'm the publisher. Come over and check out our work over there. There's a ton of stuff. If you've been checking this episode out, I got really fortunate to have a photographer that hopefully I think is going to be doing a couple games for us this year, and was there, which is great because when you go to FCS games, a lot of times like my image services I get, like USA Today, Getty, they usually don't go to those games. So you'll see a whole photo album. His name's David Kilburn, and he did an awesome job with the photos that he did. So follow him on Twitter at Davey Kilburn. Kilburn. He does some great work. So follow us. We'll be back again tomorrow to talk about this Mizzou game. We'll answer the question, will AJ do some of those Mizzou pods again? Because that was a train wreck last time. Anyways, thank you all so much. Make sure you hit that like and subscribe, and we'll see you again tomorrow for another episode of Locked On Boston College, your team every day.